welcome to the June 2023 episode of Hunt Camp Mail. Once again, I got a ton of letters this month, probably the most I've ever had. So I tried to pick most of my letters this month from a pool of new fans to this channel that have never written to me before. Well, roe deer hunting in Europe seems to have gotten off to a great start for your Europeans this year. Thomas from Belgium harvested this really nice roe deer with his Tikka T3X and 30-06. Hagen from Germany and Malcolm from the UK also harvested beautiful roe deer this season, but they asked me not to post their pictures. Turkey season was kind of iffy this year for most of us out west because this weird wet and cold weather we've had this spring really pushed the turkeys back, and they were a couple of months behind the season. So for the first time in a long time, I got no public land turkeys this year. But Bradley from Wisconsin shot a nice tom this year and sent me this pic. I posted some content this month that was really different from what you see on other channels. I try to be original with a lot of my content, but I do think that the last video I did about firearms development peaking went over most of my viewers' heads. You know, a lot of you think that buffalo bore commercial ammunition or the Tikka rifles were, you know, a major innovation in firearm history, and they weren't. And I don't get the whole Tikka thing with that video. It just, everybody popped off there. The greatest development in firearm history is the Tikka. And I really don't get it. And I guess that also reflected the fact that I got a lot of Tikka related questions this month. Well, you know, with that quick prologue out of the way, let's get to June's mail. And our first letter for June of 2023 is from Noah in Virginia. Noah wrote, I just started watching your Hunt Camp Mail episodes. I actually like them better than your regular videos, which are also excellent. I find myself playing them in the background while I work or do things around the house, sort of like listening to a podcast. It's an interesting way to do it. Regarding last month's Hunt Camp Mail, you said to use non-TSA locks on your gun case. Why would you do this? Wouldn't the TSA just cut those non-TSA locks off your gun case? Never ever use TSA locks on your gun case. 49 CFR states that your gun case must be locked and only you should retain the key or the combination to those locks. But a qualified ATF agent or TSA agent may request the key to inspect your case, you know, which usually is done in your presence. They don't really like opening it without you there. You have to declare your firearms in advance with the airline. And normally, when you arrive at the baggage check counter, the airline will check in your normal bags, you know, including the one with your ammunition in it, and will call a TSA agent to inspect your firearm for you. But don't open your gun case at the ticketing counter in front of the airline employees. We don't do that. So they'll call a TSA agent over, and it might take forever for a TSA agent to show up to inspect your gun case. So make sure if you're flying anywhere, especially internationally, you check in really early while traveling with firearms, because TSA can be a little bit of a hang up with your firearms. And after your airline summons the TSA, normally your gun case will be taken to a TSA inspection table where the TSA agent will ask you to open up your case. You know, some do a really thorough inspection of your case, and some just kind of give it a quick glance and approve it. But after this, they put a sticker on your case, and you'll have no further issues after that. Where people do have issues is when an airline employee throws your gun case on the conveyor without having the TSA inspect it first. Then, when your gun case gets into baggage handling down in the guts of the airport, A TSA agent is going to want to open that case because it hasn't been inspected yet. And they'll be paging you over the intercom like crazy for the key or the combination. And so don't put yourself in that situation. That is where bad things happen when traveling with firearms. The TSA is going to inspect your gun case no matter what. So it's best to have them inspect it in front of you before it goes on the luggage conveyor. So make sure that happens. If an ignorant airline employee tries to throw your gun on the conveyor before it's inspected by the TSA, stop them and demand a TSA inspection before they put your gun case on that conveyor. And let's be honest here, a lot of airline employees just aren't aware of the procedure they're supposed to go through with firearms. This isn't 30, 40 years ago when, airline employees were the best of the best. Now, airline employees are basically, a mad dash to the bottom. I mean, probably your average person that takes the order at McDonald's is more intelligent than the person behind an airline counter these days. But don't let them just throw your gun case on the conveyor without a TSA inspection. The TSA also does not want you to use those fragile little TSA locks on your gun case. The TSA hires felons. You heard that right. They hire felons, and anything short of being convicted for terrorism or explosives or something like that could land you a job with the TSA. Many airline employees and airport employees and baggage handlers are also felons. And the TSA really doesn't want anyone getting into your gun case except for you. In fact, on long gun cases, the TSA wants you to use 2, 3, and sometimes even 4 locks to prevent theft. They'll almost always totally reject your rifle case if you only have 1 lock on it. So they want locks on it and they don't want TSA locks on it. Hope that answers that question. And our next letter is from Johnny. Johnny wrote, I will be reloading for 2 new calibers, the 338-06 A square and the 6.5-06 A square. I have 100 new 30-06 brass cases that I will be necking up to 338 caliber, and 50 new 25-06 cases I will be necking up to 264. Do you think that I should also anneal the case mouth down to the shoulders, or can I wait until after the first time I shoot them? Well, that's an easy answer to that question, Johnny. Since you're using brand new virgin brass for this, what you should be doing if you're sizing up for a different cartridge. It was already annealed at the factory, so you don't need to anneal it again until after you fire the case for the first time. And our next letter is from Don in New Zealand. Don wrote, I've dreamed about grizzly, moose guided hunts in Alaska, but there are so many conflicting ideas of caliber size acceptable to humanely take a bear, be it brown or an inland grizzly. I'll be buying ammo in Alaska before a guided hunt if my dream comes true because of the hassle with Air New Zealand and Canadian Airlines regarding ammo. What suitable factory brands projectiles of 300 Win Mag ammo can be purchased in Alaska with velocities over 3,000 feet per second, and what do you recommend? Also, footwear. I see hunters using wading boots, which are terrible, and I couldn't imagine walking in them. Does anyone use waterproof socks with neoprene gaiters against the skin of the leg so they don't leak into your socks with good hunting boots? I see what you're saying here, Don. But I honestly think that the 300 Win Mag might be a little bit too light for grizzly bears, in my opinion. The last 2 guides that I used recommended 338 Win Mag at a minimum. If I did use 300 Win Mag, it'll kill a bear. But if I did use it, I'd want to use 200 or 220 grain bullets for that. But good commercial ammo in that weight will be very, very hard to find, especially in Alaska. If you go to the Cabela's in Anchorage, you'll likely only find 150 to 180 grain loads in stock for 300 Win Mag. It's not like you think. As a matter of fact, Our Cabela's here in California is probably stocks more ammo than the Cabela's in Anchorage, Alaska. With footwear, footwear will depend on the area that you're going to hunt in. In some areas, good hiking boots is really all you'll ever need. But in other areas, you're going to be wearing waders all day. You know, if you hunt where waders are needed, a breathable stocking foot wading pant is really what you need. Don't get those chest waders like we wear when we're fly fishing. Get a wading pant with suspenders because you'll be doing a lot of walking in those, and it'll keep you comfortable. But don't buy the full neoprene waders, buy the breathable ones too. Those are a lot more comfortable to walk around in all day. Also, don't get those boot foot waders, you know, the ones with the rubber boots in them. Don't get those. Get a good stocking foot wader that requires separate wading boots. And I'll assure you, as an avid fly fisherman, today's wading boots by companies like Simms are fantastic, and you could comfortably walk for many miles in them. And don't forget wool socks and base layers to go underneath those waders. And Don, I also want you to have realistic expectations of what your Alaska hunt might be like. You know, a lot of people think just grizzlies are roaming around everywhere on public land where you can hunt them, just roaming around everywhere. They are in the national parks and some of the protected areas, but you know, finding a good trophy grizzly bear is kind of the luck of the draw. As a matter of fact, my last 2 attempts there in Alaska were huge, expensive failures. I mean, in retrospect, I probably should have spent less money and hunted brown bears in Russia, but you know, that option's pretty much off the table now. And our next letter is from Alex in Jacksonville, Florida. Alex wrote, I wanted to try the 250 grain Barnes TTSX for my 375 H&H. Those bullets were really hard to find, so I decided to give the Hornady CX a try. The 2 bullets look highly similar. Looking at the load data from Hornady for Reloader 15, they start at 63.2 grains and the maximum recommended load is 70.7 grains for a max expected velocity of 2650 feet per second. I looked at the recommendations from Barnes for the 250 grain TTSX for Reloader 15. Barnes starts at 69 grains and the maximum recommended is 76.7 for an expected velocity of 2863 feet per second. That's a huge difference. I'm not looking for specific load data from you, but instead would like your thoughts on why the disparity between Hornady and Barnes on load data for what appears to be close to identical bullets. And that's a great question, Alex. Honestly, I don't shoot the Hornady CX, but you know, it's very common for some reloading data to be very conservative compared to another manufacturer's reloading data. You know, a lot of this has to do with the test rifle that they use and also the components that they use in their loads. But looking at the bullets themselves, a 250 grain CX does appear to have more bearing surface area and contact with the bore compared to the 250 grain TTSX. So, you know, perhaps that explains the lower velocities with the CX. I don't know, but this is why I don't use the same load data between different bullet manufacturers or between different bullets of the same weight. You know, I work up separate loads for all of them. You know, but just to let you know, there's also probably some typical Hornady hype probably involved in this. The 375 Ruger is basically a proprietary Hornady cartridge, and they're going to do everything in their power to steer you away from the H&H in favor of their cartridge. You know, even though both 375s give the same velocity because they have the same usable case capacity. You know, Hornady often gives load data for the 375 Ruger that's 1 to 200 or more feet per second, more than what the 375 H&H does in their book. So Hornady can be a pretty shady company at times, so take what they say with a grain of salt. And our next letter is from Chris in Rome, Georgia. Chris asked, I bought a box of Federal premium plated brass Barnes TSX and 270, but the bullets are copper. What about the Terminal Ascent, which has plated bullets? Would those harm barrels? Well, Chris, I don't know, because really Federal hasn't been very kind to reloaders when it comes to providing us with Terminal Ascent bullets. When I do get them, I'll test the nickel plating to see what it really is. I'll test it with my alloy analyzer. My guess is that it's probably Cooper nickel, which kind of fell out of favor in the early 20th century, but it was used to coat bullets. In an article by American Rifleman a couple years ago, Federal was asked why they used nickel coating on those bullets, and Federal stated that it was just purely for cosmetic reasons, so that silver would contrast with the blue tip of the bullet. By weight, nickel is a lot more expensive than copper, so it seems like a huge hassle just to make a bullet look cooler. But as far as the wear it puts on a barrel, I really have no clue, because I really have no clue what that coating actually is. And our next letter is from Billy in Texas. Billy wrote, I saw your last hunt camp mail about liberals harassing hunters. What about all the game wardens harassing hunters? Ooh, this is going to be good. You failed to mention that. I got a violation last year for doing nothing and got harassed in November for being suspected of shooting on private property. My best friend was carrying a .30-30 for protection while walking in the woods and got accused of hunting without a license. Recently, I had 2 local wardens in Harris County harass me while fishing this year. I think wardens harass people more than the liberals do. According to you, Billy, you've had 5 run-ins for illegal activity with game wardens in the last year. That's 5 run-ins in a year. Yes, there probably are some bad wardens out there. Hey, I've met a couple of them. Even the game wardens I've talked to admit that there's a couple of bad badge-heavy officers in the ranks, but they're in the vast minority. I'd say less than 1%. And that gives the good officers a bad name. But you had 5 negative experiences with game wardens in 1 year. And that kind of sounds like you might be the problem, Billy. I think you need to reflect on exactly what you were doing to make these wardens think you were conducting illegal activity. And I'd love to see that copy of your violation for doing nothing. I'd love to see that, by the way. If you're walking around in the woods during deer season with a loaded .30-30, every warden in the country is going to consider that hunting. Sorry, Billy.
Bullshit! Bullshit! Bullshit!
And our next letter is from Harold from Wisconsin. Harold wrote, I saw a video where Steve Rinella eats a coyote. In all of your outdoor adventures, have you ever resorted to eating a coyote? If you have eaten a coyote, how did it taste? Interesting question. But the answer is abso-fucking-lutely not. If Rinella wants to eat coyotes, he can have at it. I've been hungry in my lifetime. And I mean, I've been really hungry in my lifetime, but I've never been hungry enough to eat a coyote. And I really hope I'm never in that position. You're pretty much already fucked if coyote's on the menu. And our next letter is from John from Riverside, California. John wrote, I watched your videos, big bore bolt action rifles, 458 lot, and the video called Preparing for a Buffalo Hunt. In all 3 of those videos, you handle those heavy recoil rounds better than the average person shooting a .270 Winchester. You have almost no muzzle rise, you don't get rocked back, and you get quick, accurate follow-up shots. I watched other hunters, like Ron Spomer, shoot similar guns, and they have big muzzle rise and get pushed back during the shot. Those guys look visibly smaller than you. Do you think it's harder for smaller statured hunters to shoot rounds with big recoil. I plan to hunt 2 buffalo in 2024, and the fact that I'm only 5'5" makes me worried about felt recoil with big guns. You know, as almost any woman will attest to, size is never the limiting factor. Technique is everything. Buzz Charlton is probably the most successful elephant hunter in Africa right now. And he's also probably the smallest, shortest dangerous game PH in Africa also. He handles his 500 Nitro Express like a champ, and he shoots it a lot. And I think this is because he has great technique. Elmer Keith was rumored to be only 5'4". But, he certainly compensated for that by shooting some really big guns in his time. I've also seen lots of ladies handle big guns. So clear your mind of any thoughts of your size limiting your ability to shoot heavy recoiling cartridges, because it's not true. If you did watch those videos in their entirety, as well as my video titled Offhand Shooting for the Hunter, which is another one you should be watching, you'd see that good technique is really what helps control recoil. And I don't do this ever, and it may even be in bad taste, but I'm about to critique Ron Spomer shooting a 416 for you. Here's a video of him shooting a 416 that I found from about 2016. His technique looks pretty good to me, actually. You could see that he was standing a little too tall on his first shot, but quickly adjusted and got that perfect forward lean in subsequent shots. In this still shot right here, you can see that his technique looks great. He's more squared off to the target, which is what I like to see, rather than that stupid bladed stance, which is horrible with big rifles. He's also gripping the rifle firmly with both hands and driving it into his shoulder pocket, which is what controls the rifle and prevents your shoulder from taking a hit. His trigger elbow is in that natural position, rather than that stupid chicken wing stance that the military used to teach back in the day. His feet are the perfect width apart, like that fighting stance that I talk about. And he's using the scrunch technique on the rifle, I talk about in my offhand shooting video. Well, Ron Spomer also posted this video last year as a joke. So I hope you didn't fall for Mr. Spomer's joke video. You may have, because it looks like Mr. Spomer has pretty good technique to me. And I can't say that for most internet influencers I watch shoot. My advice to you, John, is to also watch my video titled Offhand Shooting for the Hunter. I think it'll help you out a lot. But don't feel limited just by your small stature. And our next letter is from Hagen from Germany. Hagen wrote, "What are your thoughts on hunting with suppressors? Would you do it if they weren't so harshly regulated where you live? I personally am completely convinced by their utility. Could see their drawbacks on rifles with long barrels or when hiking for extended periods." Well, I would definitely 100% guarantee you use suppressors on most of my rifles if I could. I think they're, fantastic for a standard general purpose hunting rifle. I really do. But as you point out, I do 80% of my hunting in my home state, and possessing a suppressor in my state is a felony. Also, countries like Canada and most of the free range hunting countries in Africa don't allow suppressors. So, I wouldn't have a lot of use for them on my international travels either. But I think suppressors are all upside for most hunting, and I wish the stupid politicians would realize that. And our next letter is from John from Australia. John wrote, "I think of the various scandals and controversies that have taken place over the last few years, and I wonder if they could have been prevented or at least greatly diminished, if pictures of the dead animals involved haven't been posted on social media. So much of the backlash against hunting today seems to come from people who only see pictures of hunters posing with dead animals. Because there is often no context with these photos, many people have an intense negative reaction. Do you think that posting pictures on social media of animals you have hunted does more harm than good? Well, yes and no. People who get offended over hunting are just going to hate you no matter what, and you're not going to fix that or change their ways. And, you're just never going to change their mind no matter how hard you try or how much you give in to their demands. When weak-willed hunters give in to the demands of these woke progressives, you only make them stronger and more emboldened. Basically, if their fake outrage over a dead animal brings results, it makes them feel that, they're entitled to change other behaviors that you have. When you don't give in, they usually move on to something else to be offended by, but I wouldn't give them an inch personally. So we should just let our cockles swing, as our friend Mick would put it, and not be ashamed of being hunters. How is hunting ever going to survive into the future if we keep our activity a secret, for fear of offending woke people? But there is an aspect of hunting pictures on social media that I do believe hurts us, and that's pictures that disrespect animals. Seeing pictures of people with their foot on top of an animal's head is completely disrespectful. People who make funny pictures with dead animals are also disrespecting those animals. And you're really doing hunting a disservice if you're captioning your pictures with some dumb redneck Keith Warren type saying or slogan underneath your hunting pictures, like, blew his freaking brains out with my 50 cal today. We need to stay away from that type of stuff too. Basically, a highly developed living creature was killed so that we can live. So that animal deserves the utmost respect, even in the pictures. Clean the blood off and guts up before you take a picture, and pose with the animal in a noble, calm position. Look thankful for a sacrifice. Then take a picture so the animal can be memorialized forever. And that's the right way to take a picture and put it on social media. So keep the pictures respectful and post away. In my opinion, going into hiding is the worst thing we can do for hunting. And it's ultimately responsible for the position that we're in today. And our next letter is from Lorenzo, and Lorenzo didn't say where he was from. Lorenzo wrote, I found your channel on YouTube and started watching your videos, and I must say, you speak about a lot of things that other reviewers just don't talk about. I saw recently your video about the Browning X-Bolt, which is an amazing video that displays the qualities of the X-Bolt. But I am also thinking about buying a Tikka T3X. Which one would you take? Can you help me with making my choice, please? Oh yes, I'm also torn between the 300 Win Mag and the 30-06 for shooting deer and wild boar with this gun. Well, Lorenzo, the important features of a hunting rifle, like a reliable, good magazine, the safety, the extractor, the recoil lug, I think all of these things are better on the X-Bolt than on the Tikka. Accuracy will be nearly equal between the two. The Moroku barrel on the Browning guns are every bit as good as a Tikka barrel, in my opinion. But the X-Bolt just has a better design. I also love the scope mounting innovation that they integrate into the X-Bolt as well. But the fact that you want a 30-06 really makes the X-Bolt a better choice over the Tikka, in my opinion. For some stupid reason, Tikka makes their 30-06 barrels with a 1 in 11 twist, which I don't really like. Browning uses the traditional and well-loved 1 in 10 twist rate, which, makes the 30-06 so versatile. So if you're going to get a 30-06, I would stay away from the Tikka anyway. And our next letter is from Jason from Australia. A lot of Australia letters every month. Jason wrote, I understand how the mandrel opens up the neck of the case to different internal diameters, but when seating the projectile in the seating die, won't the internal bushing of the seating die, which will always be the same size, just crimp the neck back to the same tension on the projectile, regardless of how much we open the neck diameter with a mandrel? Ooh, that's a sentence. Or are there dies on the market that have the ability to adjust the crimping bushing? A seating die should never ever support, squeeze, or alter the shape of a case in any way. Also, if your seating die has one of those roll crimping features on it, never use it. Make sure you adjust your seating die so it doesn't crimp your case or alter it in any ways. It just seats the bullet. That's all you want your seating die to do. 90% of the time, you really don't need a crimp at all. But when you do need a crimp, use the Leaf Factory crimp die and do it as a separate step instead of using the roll crimp feature on a seating die. And our next letter is from Tim in California. Tim wrote, that was a great video about gun development. You earned my subscription. The comments on that video, where many of your viewers think Tikka rifles are more accurate than any other rifles, made me laugh. I'm a gunsmith in the Inland Empire and deal with Tikkas and most other rifles every day. From my experience as a gunsmith of 25 years, I say that the Tikka is the most overrated rifle made today. Well, in addition to fishing and hunting and off-roading, I've also been into hot rods my whole life. And at any given time, I've always owned a really fast car that I built myself. When you pull up to a street light with a boosted V8 rumbling under the hood of your car, there's always a guy in a Honda Civic with a 3-foot spoiler on the back who pulls up next to you and revs his engine. You know, in his mind, his Honda Civic is the fastest car on the streets because his previous car was a Kia Rio. You know, he's never driven anything that was really fast or had premium features in it. So he drives around believing that his Civic is just the best car in town. He honestly, you know, he constantly probably goes online and confidently states that his Honda Civic will run with any of the big boys. And Tikka owners are kind of like that. You know, the kid in the Honda doesn't realize that his Civic is just a good budget car. And the Tikka owner often doesn't realize that his T3X is just a good budget rifle. And our next letter is from Javier from Glendale, Arizona. Javier wrote, I sized 25 cases of 270 WSM brass about 5 months ago, and they sat in a reloading tray untouched for 5 months. I then sized 25 more cases and loaded all 50 rounds at the same time before going to the range. At the range, something crazy happened. The rounds from the brass I sized 5 months ago had different velocities, were slightly less accurate, and had a bigger standard deviation than the loads from the brass I sized right before loading. Does sizing your brass in different conditions affect loads? Well, you made a great observation, Javier, but you're a little bit off on your hypothesis. The conditions that you loaded your brass in wasn't the issue. The time factor was the issue. Brian Litz wrote a great article a long time ago about how neck tension of sized brass changes over time if you let that sized brass sit for long periods before loading. He concluded that if you want consistency, make sure that you load your brass, only load brass that's been sized at the same time. You know, you could greatly minimize the effects of this by annealing. And if precision is your goal, you should be annealing your brass. And our next letter is from Walter from Yorba Linda, California. Walter wrote, I just learned to cast a fly and want to take a big family fly fishing trip somewhere. I'll be taking my 4 children and 9 grandkids, as well as my wife and brother. We will need to rent fly gear and get a guide. What do you recommend? It's a lot of people. Honestly, Walter, that sounds like a planning nightmare. The thought of 16 people fly fishing together at the same time, especially when 9 of them are children, just sounds like a huge hassle. Fly fishing is the only form of fishing that really isn't a good group activity. From shore, if you're fishing from shore or along a creek, fly anglers really need a lot of space away from one another to cast and the ability to cover water that hasn't been fished in a period of time, as you work upstream. Even if you go somewhere where you need to hire a drift boat or a skiff, they usually won't allow more than 2 anglers per boat. I'd honestly just stick with conventional fishing with a group that big. You can rent a lake house somewhere and you can all fish from shore, or, you could charter a big boat in the ocean that can accommodate all 16 of you. But, if you're insistent on fly fishing with a group of 16 people, I'd contact Matt Heron Fly Fishing in the Lake Tahoe, Truckee area, California. And he could put you all together in one of his fly fishing clinics. You would probably have the whole class, and he could put you all together, and his fly fishing clinic happens on a private pond stocked with fish. This way you all get lessons from an expert fly angler, and you get to catch fish in a controlled environment, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. And our next letter is from Omar from Michigan. Omar wrote, I can't decide between the Tikka T3X or Weatherby. My research indicated the Weatherby is a better rifle, but I see nothing but good reviews for the Tikka on internet forums. What would you buy in 7mm for deer hunting? The Tikka T3 line, the whole T3 line when it came out, was specifically designed and manufactured from the start as a budget rifle. It has a crappy floating recoil lug, a cheap plastic or zinc bolt shroud that have been known to blow off, a short magazine, too much freebore, and normally one of those cheap injection molded stocks. But they did come with great barrels and triggers from the factory. When the Tikka T3s were cheap, they really were a good value. When the Tikka T3 came out in 2003, some places were selling them for under $500. That was a time when Remington quality was just in the toilet, and Winchester and Savage were also having issues. Ruger was in a leadership transition and having some issues too. And the Weatherby Vanguard was just a bare bones rifle sold only at Walmart. So Tikka really came in at the right time and took control of the affordable rifle market when it was just at its worst. Sure, you could get a Mark V, a Super Grade, a Browning, a Sako, or a Kimber. That was obviously better than the Tikka, but you'd spend 2, 3, or maybe even 4 times the money to get those. So the Tikka T3 made a lot of sense in that market when it was first released. But by the time the Tikka T3X came out in around 2016 or so, the budget rifle market had pretty much caught up. And today we have so many cheap rifles on the market, like the Mossberg Patriot and Ruger American and some of the Bergeras and stuff like that. That we have so many budget rifles on the market now that the Tikka is actually considered a mid-price rifle today. But if you look at rifle features and accuracy, a modern Bergera or Weatherby Vanguard is just as accurate as the Tikka, has better features and a cheaper price tag. The Vanguard is actually a superior rifle in almost every way compared to the Tikka T3X. The Vanguard has a solid recoil lug and M16 style extractor on it, a one-piece bolt, a high-quality Japanese barrel, and, it doesn't have bolt stop issues either like the Tikka does. And I believe it has a better magazine. If you just want the best of the really cheap budget rifles, just get a Howa, which, is who makes the Weatherby Vanguard. Personally, I'd take the Vanguard over the Tikka if it was my choice. And our last question this month is from Mike in Colorado. Mike wrote, I'm a Colorado wildlife officer and watched your guide to youth hunting. That video covers all the bases in an easy to understand format. If you don't mind, I plan to recommend your video to parents seeking guidance on taking a child hunting. That chapter where you describe the typical American dad who thinks his 10-year-old is squared away with a loaded firearm had me nodding my head the whole time. I've seen some scary things. The section about preparing your child to deal with anti-hunters is also very wise. Unfortunately, Colorado children are being groomed into an anti-hunting ideology at an alarming rate today. Well, thank you for the great compliment, and feel free to recommend any of my videos to your hunters. And thank you for your service out there to hunters, anglers, and the wildlife you protect every day. Well, that wraps up June's mail. Here's some memes for this month. For the non-reloaders out there who haven't ordered your shells for bird season or your ammunition for this coming deer season, you need to handle that right now. Birdshot is already going fast and hunting ammo is already almost gone, on the shelves of my local stores. So I give you guys early reminders every year, but some of you continue to procrastinate, don't you? I also want to say hello to Brad, who noticed me from my YouTube channel and attempted to bring me back into the local SCI chapter that I left years ago. It was great chatting with you, Brad, and great sharing hunting stories with you. And as some of you have noticed, YouTube has been playing games with my channel lately. And, I suspect a lot of hunting channels are dealing with this too. Both with the comments and with uploads and links. So please be patient with me as I try to navigate their constantly changing system, which for all intents and purposes is a moving target. And to my hetero life mate, Mick, in Australia, hang in there, bloke. You could follow my adventures by hitting me on my Insta at Desert Dog Hunting. You can also send me questions or comments at desertdogoutdoors@gmail.com. Thanks for watching, and as always, good hunting.